I left off last time. With the fall of the Roman Republic. Essentially, the Roman Empire had two falls. The Republic fell. The Republic fell around 54 BCE. And then, of course, the empire itself fell some 500 years later, 476. Now, don't worry about the dates so much, but just know, if you're asked on a test, you see the fall of the empire, or I'll say the fall of the Republic. There were two falls. Now, what caused the Republic to fall? Essentially, the Roman Republic fell when a dictatorship took over. The Roman Empire was to last another 500 years afterward, under the rule of emperors. Now, apparently, Romans started out under the rule of kings, and they vowed, we'll never have another king. So they set up something that resembled a democracy. The democracy was to last about 200 years. Under the democracy, I call it democracy, under the Republic, they defeated and conquered Carthage. They expanded their empire. They conquered all of Italy, but something went wrong, as it seems to go with all democracies. Now, I want to say this. As a result of the experience that Rome and Greece had with its democracies, democracy was to receive a really bad name. That was to be one of the main reasons why Western Europeans did not try another democracy again for more than 1,000 years. And is that very relevant for us today, folk? I think highly so. Now, what if you were to be able to go 500 years in the future and read a future history book, and it said the American democracy died in 1932? You said, hey, you know, I'm living in the year 2014, and I think of democracy. But what if future historians would say that American democracy died when we elected FDR as president? I mean, basically, if you had lived in Rome at the time, you would not have realized that your republic was dead. We modern historians say, oh, it died in 54 BC when Julius Caesar took over. Julius Caesar said, hey, your republic is still alive. And Caesar Augustus came along and said, hey, your republic is still alive. But it wasn't. Anyway, here's the story of the fall of the Roman Republic. And it was this long, slow, gradual process, just like the fall of the empire is going to be. The fall of the empire took about 300 years. A long, slow, gradual process. Anyway, we come to the Gracchus brothers. The wars impoverished a lot of Romans. And the Roman Republic found itself beset with a big problem. Many poor people found themselves out of land and out of work as their lands had been taken over rich. I mean, a poor man, at one time a poor man would go off to war to fight for his country, stay a few weeks and come home victorious and celebrate and then get back to work. Then came the Punic Wars, and then came the wars of conquest where troops had to travel farther and farther out. And oftentimes they'd come home after a couple of years away and find that their wife had married another man, or find that their wife had sold her farm because she couldn't make the payments, she couldn't do all the work required. So, or a man might come home crippled or with an arm missing or a leg missing and unable to work himself. So, to pay off his bills, you have to sell his farm. Essentially, a lot of people found themselves landless. Now, folk, again, this has been a problem down through the ages, where that lands will find their way into the hands of a few rich people who will own the land. The Jews had a really good way of solving it. They had a system where every 50 years, the land reverted back to its original owner. They had what's called a Jubilee year. And if it were 40 years to Jubilee, you paid one price for the land. If you bought land from your neighbor. If it were 30 years from Jubilee, you paid a lower price. If it were 2 years to Jubilee, you just paid a small price for land, because it's only going to be yours for 2 years. And after 50 years, when the 50-year Jubilee was over, all the land went back to the families that originally had. And that way, nobody could hoard up the land for any length of time. However, Rome did not have this system, neither did China, neither did Korea, and the lands tended to find their way in the hands of a few folk. Now, into this scenario stepped these two young men, Gracchus brothers. They were senators. They went before the Roman Senate and asked the Roman Senate to take the lands that the rich were not using and redistribute these lands among the poor people. Give the lands to the poor. The Senate not only turned a deaf ear, but folk, here's the way politics was run at this time, and I'm going to have a little bit more to say about how lousy politics was in Roman times. The Roman senators killed Tiberius. Now his younger brother then Gaius took up his cause. Again, he went before the Roman Senate and again asked the Roman Senate to redistribute lands that the Roman were not using, excess lands, to the poor. The Roman senators rose up against him and killed him also. These were not far from the only two people killed. I mean, again, this is Roman politics. Now, they're going to wind up before the class is over. We're going to talk about how they killed Julius Caesar. But anyway, you don't like someone, don't vote him out of office, just stab him. Now, the Gracchus brothers have gone down in history as heroes, and I want to say this. I don't doubt their sincerity. They had plenty of sincerity. They had plenty of courage. Other than that, I think their politics was wrong. Did any of you happen to watch any of the Roosevelt documentary that's been airing for the last couple of weeks on public TV? Any other room? A couple of my students did. There's no one in this class? Okay. Essentially, what Roosevelt tried to do was end the Depression by taxing the rich and redistributing the wealth among the poor. It was supposed to lower prices and increase wages. Instead, wages went down, unemployment increased. Wages went up, unemployment increased, which was the opposite of what it was supposed to do. And this was to go on during the entire time that President Roosevelt was fighting the Depression. The Depression finally ended when the war broke out, World War II broke out. What am I saying? What these two brothers had in mind, folk, to me was nothing less than socialism. Now, if you're a socialist, you're welcome to say so, and I promise you no argument. You're welcome to speak up. Nevertheless, I would challenge anyone to find an instance where it has worked. Now, in their day, they didn't even try. They killed the two boys who proposed it. The two young men who proposed it. Killed them outright. But anyway, well, what this did, this set off riots. These idle poor people had a lot of time on their hands where they could riot. And in fact, this is one of the things that led to the downfall of the Republic and ultimately the downfall of Rome. Rome had a lot of people with a whole lot of time on their hands, and they would get together in the forums and discuss how lousy the establishment was or how lousy the upper classes were, and how crummy the government was, and they'd get worked up so much that after a while they'd take to the streets and riot. All right. In high school, we were required to write 2 papers for our English teacher. One for the English teacher, one for the history teacher. Our English teacher and history got together and said we could all write just one paper. For a historical paper, they would count it for both history and English. So my very first term paper was, is American society following the footsteps of the Roman Empire? I've had a couple of pupils since do a paper similar. You're welcome to take on the topic if you want to. Are we following in the footsteps? All right. one of the problems that Rome had, a huge increase in idle poor people, and a lot of rioting, with the government sitting back and tolerating the rioting. The rioting led to lawlessness, which is one of the things that's believed to have done a lot to help bring the Roman Republic down. But then came changes in the army. All right, I hope all of you have copied this. I've juggled the camera so that only those who are here could actually see this. The ones who aren't here never saw what's on the board. I won't see what's on the board. Okay, I don't feel I'm being the least bit, yeah, I'm being partial to the ones of you who are present. And showing favoritism to you and disfavoritism to them. All right, so much for that. Now, anyway, Marius. Again, I mean, folk, maybe I liven up the class and bring up this personal stuff, but on a personal note, 35 years ago, I joined the United States Army. Back in, it was August 28, 1979. I always remember the date. When I did so, I put my left hand on the Bible and raised my right hand toward heaven and swore to the United States government to defend the United States. I did not swear to President Jimmy Carter, who was president at that time. I did not swear to Governor Busbee. Well, what Marius did, instead of having his soldiers swear an oath to the Roman Senate, which is what he was supposed to have done, he had his soldiers swear an oath of loyalty to himself. And this became a precedent, and other generals followed suit, and it got to where every wealthy Roman in Rome, every wealthy Roman collected his own army. You know, what if Ted Turner would decide he'd want to have an army and go out and hire maybe 10,000 soldiers, and some other wealthy man in Alabama decide he was going to hire 20,000 soldiers, and you know, and after a while, every wealthy man in the country would have his own army. Well, Marius started the whole process by having the Roman soldiers swear an oath of loyalty to him and not the Senate. He also recruited volunteers from the poor people who possessed no property. And essentially, he promised these men land. In other words, you go out and help me conquer, and once we have conquered together, I'll give you some land. You know, basically he was paying them from his own pockets, though, or at least well, he was going to steal the land, by the way. That was his purpose, take the land from some other people who who he conquered, and then give the land to his men. So this was the way he promised to pay them. And this was very dangerous because as certain as he started the trend, other generals took it up. Well, time went on,